Welcome back to Air Mozilla live from the Mozilla headquarters in Mountain View, California. We'll be taking your questions and talking with Doug Turner about Mozilla's mobile history, the Minimo web browser, and the Joey Project. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Thank you, Asa. Thank you for having me.
Maybe we can start with a little bit of history. How did you first get involved with Mozilla, and what were you doing at the time?
I started at Netscape in 96 and 97, and we released the Mozilla Project, open sourced all of our source code, and I've been with the project off and on since then. I was responsible for XP install. I own some of the networking code, XP.com, mostly the lower layer of technology, the stuff that's really between the browser and the operating system. In 1999, we started a project called Minimo. It was the idea was to strip a lot of the bloat and feature set away from the browser so that we can run it on small Linux hardware. Since then, it's sort of developed on its own to be sort of a consumer web browser for Linux devices and Windows CE devices.
So right now, Minimo is available for download, or can you get it on existing devices?
Right. For Linux, you can go ahead and compile it. We don't provide any binaries for Linux. For Windows Mobile, you can get it from the Mozilla project page. So for any Windows mobile device that's 4.2 or greater, you can go ahead and download and try it out.
So you mentioned that this Minimo effort was to strip out some of the features and bloat from the Mozilla browser.
Right.
What do you have left? What is the Minimo browser experience on a portable device?
Right, that's a really good question. So as time goes on, hardware gets better and better, and so you can kind of afford to run more and more software on the device. So the differences between Firefox itself and the Minimo browser are a set of small changes, mostly performance and preference changes to reduce cache sizes, basically to make it a little bit smaller. In terms of functionality, with a very few exceptions, we're sort of bug compatible with Firefox. The main difference is Minimo has a different front end, right? So it looks a lot different. We have different concerns like pin input, tapping and holding. What can you do in a quarter VGA or like a very small screen that you can't do in Firefox? So those are some of the UI differences. I don't think we've polished all of those out, but I think that will always be an ongoing problem. Making the web right for small screens is a hard problem.
On the content side, is it a safe bet that if you can browse a website comfortably in Firefox or SeaMonkey, that you'll also be able to browse that site in Minimo? Are you mostly the same in terms of the rendering capacities?
Well, I think in general, most of the web is broken for small screens. So if you go to CNN.com and you want to view it on a quarter VGA screen, and the website doesn't know that you're a small browser, it's going to give you all 600K and ask you to render it for an 800 by 600 screen. So from the user's perspective, it seems to be a broken experience. On the technology side, Minimo has the sort of really, really good support for all of the standards. It's the same basically technology as Firefox, but it's not clear that websites are really designed for small screens. I think there are a couple interesting places where this is changing. For instance, if you look at the number of things that the iPhone changed, there's tons of websites out there for the iPhone. I mean, that is really interesting. It puts awareness around changing your website to support a mobile device. I think it's somewhat disconnected in that there's tons of other phones that can render at QVGA, the small screen resolution, and it's just supporting the iPhone seems great now, but there's
a little short-sighted.
Right, there's tons more phones that have decent browsers on them that can access your site.
What kind of resolution are we seeing in these new generation of devices like the iPhone or some of these new tablet devices from Nokia? Are we moving up to a resolution that's a little more comparable with what web developers are using to reference when they build their websites like CNN.com?
No, I don't think so. I think most I think most web designers are still targeting desktop because that's the bulk of their traffic. 800 by 600 or even 640 by 480 are somewhat the standard. Most phones that are like smartphones that have a decent browser have QVGA screens, so a quarter of the size of 640 by 480. So they're very, very tiny screens. That is, even reduced further with any UI element. So if there's a URL bar or a menu or a system menu, that sort of shrinks your view down. There's a lot of interesting ways to display content. For instance, like the S60, the Nokia S60 has a really nice browser on it that allows you to kind of take these very elevated views and scroll around the web page. It's very similar to what the iPhone does, where you can kind of, just
so you're panning around, right, essentially, but you're not going to see the whole page.
That's right. So you can get a very high level 10,000 foot view and then zoom into a very small rectangle and look around. The alternate to that is something called SSR, small screen rendering. I think the term is from Opera, but it's sort of used across the board now. And the idea is to take a web page and reduce it to a single column by taking web content and wrapping it underneath one another. So just single scrolling straight down the page will allow you to see the page. That is also a broken experience in some ways, where if you go to Amazon.com, you're expecting their site and their presentation, but what you're finding is content has been mangled around. Neither are great, but I think I'm on the fence of this panning and zooming across the page seems to be the best so far.
But ultimately, it's a very different experience, no matter how you get down to it. The web content was developed for larger screens,
right.
and no solution is going to be seamless or comfortable for someone who's used to experiencing the web on a full screen.
Right, I think that's correct. I think the best place we want to be in is to be able to have a user go to the site that they usually go to on the desktop and have that content be right for that browser. So if I'm used to going to the BBC News on my desktop, I can type in the BBC News URL on my phone and get content that's remarkably similar but different.
So that brings up a new effort at Mozilla called Project Joey, which is quite a bit different from the approach that we took with Minimo, or that Apple has taken with Safari on the iPhone, or even then Opera has taken with its mobile devices. Tell us a little bit about Joey, how it came about, and what it looks like today.
Okay, so Joey is a different approach completely in mobile. Mozilla is a browser company. We build browsers, we have an email client, we have a very, very good web technology stack. Joey is sort of different. It basically allows a user to take content and metadata that's in the browser and get it to your phone. And getting it to your phone, we go through a server, we can transcode the content, get it right for that particular phone model. And then we have some software that runs on the phone, either a piece of Java that can run on the phone and play around with that content, or we can expose it in a web way. So if the default web browser on the phone can use it. So it's not a browser in any way. It's not a browser play. It's basically allowing you to take an image that you see in a web page and take it with you. Or if you see a interesting video on any video site, to be able to take that video from Firefox and send it to your phone so that you have it with you. There's also some interesting like TiVo-like functionality that we can build in it, so that suppose that your browsing experience on the desktop is you go to like 5 or 6 news sites, and they each have RSS, and you maybe do this a few times a day. We can watch this and be able to automatically syndicate those feeds to your phone. So you don't have to explicitly push a button or type in something. You just naturally have that web feed on your phone wherever you are. So all of these are experiments. So there's an organization called labs.mozilla.com that allows me and other people to experiment with these sorts of projects and see if they work. If they work, that's great. If they don't, we sort of move on.